This is really Just Stop. Here's Ross, the host with today's dose of common sense.
Hey, hello everybody, and welcome back. It's February 28th, 2025, and I don't know, I just wanted to talk about some things today. Today's just been a crazy day. If you've paid attention to the news at all, you know that it was just an insane day. All sorts of weird things have happened, including our president and vice president embarrassing themselves on the world stage and verbally attacking President Zelensky from Ukraine. Absolutely absurd, the whole thing. We also found out that Pete Hegseth, the Fox News talking head, who is now our Secretary of Defense, had informed U.S. Cyber Command to stop doing any Russia planning. I guess stop doing any planning that might prevent Russia from attacking us with our on cyber, which is exactly what the Cyber Command's job would be. To be first defend us against cyber attack and counterattack. So apparently Russia's off the table now. And I haven't looked into that very deeply, but that's what the little blurbs are saying about that whole thing. And that to me is just absolutely absurd. And boy, are things going to shit really fast. It's been a month, barely over a month of the Trump administration. But one thing, I wanted to look for something positive today. So one thing that I found is Kiki Camerena. It's so long ago you may not know the story. But in 1985, a man named Enrique Kiki Camerena was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered in Mexico. And that man happened to be a DEA agent. Well, the man who allegedly is responsible for that has been in Mexican custody, I guess, for I'm not really sure how long. But we have him now. Rafael Caro Quintero is now in U.S. custody. He was one of 29 different criminals that Mexico turned over to us just yesterday, I think it was. Might have been today. At some point, just like recently, the last 48 hours or so. So this is kind of an interesting development because the Kiki Camerena case is in and of itself a conspiracy. There's a lot involved in that has never been answered. There have been accusations, there have been insinuations, there have been inferences, there have been documentaries, one of which I watched. I've watched a couple of them over the years, but one of which I watched kind of claimed that the CIA actually killed him, and that a white person, an American, was there during his interrogation. So there's some recordings, I guess, and it's been a while since I saw this documentary, so you'll have to forgive if my brain isn't remembering everything, but I do seem to recall that there were recordings, audio recordings of something, and there was an American voice in there, or at least a Caucasian voice that sounded American or something like that. But very interesting case, and for a long time it seemed like no one wanted to solve it. And so now it looks like we have the guy, at least the guy who Mexico says is to blame. I'm not sure if we agree or not, but we have him. And he's going to finally have his day in court and face justice here in the United States. And so that's a win. I don't know if it's going to bring us any new information. I'm not sure how willing he's going to be, Mr. Quintero, to talk, to spill his guts about all of that stuff, unless he can sensationalize it and say, oh, the FBI or the CIA or whatever was involved. then he may talk. But as far as admitting that he did the deed, I don't know if he has already. I would have to go in and do some research. But I don't know if it's going to answer any of the questions that have surrounded the Camerena case for literally 40 years. So we'll wait and see. And I'm looking forward to that because it's literally been a question mark out there in the conspiracy world for decades. And I'm hoping that we learn some more about that, or at least some other investigative journalists will go in and kind of update a documentary or a series about Camerena and bring some more detail into that so that people can get a clear picture of this incident that happened and Camerena's memory and everything. So it'd be really nice if somebody grabbed that and ran with it, somebody who's already well educated on the case. I'm not. I'm just a peripheral observer kind of person, but it was a big deal when it happened. And it's kind of been forgotten over the years because, like I said, it was 40 years ago. But hopefully some more details come out of that and everything gets resolved as far as answering those questions about who might have been involved in it and who may have ordered his death and all those other things. So good kudos, Pam Bondi. Nice job. I don't know. This has probably been in the works since before the Trump administration came in. I'm going to assume that these sorts of things take a long time to work out. But I don't know who the other 29 people are. I don't know if this article actually mentions them or not. I don't know. I'm not going to go into it and try to investigate it. But I'm sure they're all Mexicans who are wanted for drug crimes and criminal organizations and things like that. And they're just, whatever. They're all going to be bad guys. And maybe one day we'll find out why they were wanted by the United States and those sorts of things. But this article only concentrates on the Camerena thing with Quintero. But, I got to give it to him. It's good. It's a good thing. And so hopefully the Camerena family will get some closure. His son is a judge. Enrique Camerena is a judge here in the United States. And so the family might have a little more information, a little more closure, perhaps, in the near future. All good things. Other things, not so good. One interesting thing is that I'm not sure if I'm going to find it because I want to make sure that I don't misquote any of this stuff. But it was Stephen Greenstreet, I believe. Hopefully, I got that right too. So let me double check. But it was about Lou Elizondo and Jay Stratton. There was an email chain somewhere, and here it is. Let me pull this up. So Stephen Greenstreet on X, this is what he posted. A 2020 Pentagon email chain, which included Jay Stratton, who was one of the ATIP people, states that Lou Elizondo did not run ATIP, was not part of ATIP. And all Elizondo did was some coordination / introductions. And then Greenstreet goes on to say, I know for a fact that Stratton concurs with that. Elizondo became a minor celebrity after claiming in the New York Times that he ran a Pentagon UFO program named ATIP. Elizondo enjoyed years of TV and movie appearances, magazine profiles, speaking engagements, and a lucrative book deal. But Elizondo's claim was false. This newly released Pentagon email is yet another piece of evidence that supports my New York Post reporting. So, and he's got a picture of the email with the redactions and everything. So that's interesting because he pretty much has made a living the last few years telling people that he used to run this program. And I've seen it before where people have said that Elizondo wasn't running ATIP and all of that. There's also people who say that, or have said, that ATIP wasn't even a real thing. Elizondo usually gets around situations like that by very vaguely mentioning things like, I worked for an organization once known as OSAP that eventually became known as ATIP, to make it seem like he was involved in that organization years and years before. That would have given him many more years of experience working in the UAP space, which is a funny thing to say, the UAP space, the space space. But it wasn't true. He never worked for OSAP, and OSAP closed down years before he ever went to the Pentagon and worked in the UFO, thing. So that wasn't true, but he always worded it in a way to where you could just accept the fact that he was saying the organization I worked for used to be called this, but when I was there, it was this. And it was always very kind of shady, the way he did it. And everything about it is kind of shady, especially now that there's a lot of information coming out saying that, nah, that's all bullshit. He didn't do what he claims he was doing. And the big thing that was out yesterday, though, that was for years, people like Elizondo and others have said there is very clear video, Navy video, I believe, of a triangular UAP emerging from the ocean and flying off. People have talked about this a lot. I've heard it mentioned by a lot of different people in a lot of different podcasts and TV shows and, documentaries and all those sorts of things over the years. And apparently that never happened, and it was never a real thing. There are no photographs. There's nothing. And the people who ran the UAP desk and have come out and said, no, there is no such image. It didn't exist. Nobody ever told us that it existed, on and on and on. So now it's left, for all of us to assume that everyone who mentioned that was either just passing on information that somebody else had told them, or they were just lying and trying to, sell more books or whatever else they do. I don't know how these people make money. Speaking engagements, I guess. But apparently it's not real. It was not a thing that actually happened, and there's no photograph. And a lot of those people have claimed and kind of sworn on the fact that there was a photograph, and there just isn't. And I don't know if that's going to put that to rest. I'm sure somebody is out there right now saying there's a photograph of a triangular UAP coming out of the ocean. And that person is just going to be passing along something they read or heard somewhere else. The other situation, the Epstein files. This giant debacle. The Epstein thing has been a favorite of conspiracy theorists for a long time, even before, he was found dead in his cell in New York, and before he was even arrested on this thing. Years and years ago, and back in the 90s, I believe, is when they first started having, issues with Jeffrey Epstein and his first arrests, the accusations, yada, yada. He gets out of it, and so on and so forth, and the whole sex trafficking, underage girls thing. There's the now famous and infamous video of Donald Trump talking about Epstein and how Epstein liked him on the younger side, things like that. Plenty of photographs and videos of Trump standing, hanging out with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Of course, he never would have had anything to do with any of that stuff. And he's the president of the United States, for God's sakes. How could anyone say such a thing? But there's, I think, the person I've seen photographs the most with Epstein, aside from Maxwell, is Trump. Those pictures and videos are everywhere. And it's, from years ago. So before he got arrested and all those other things, and supposedly before a conviction or something. But what happened was the Attorney General and other people and the declassification disclosure task force thing that's going on up there in Washington, D.C., all promised that they were going to release records of Jeffrey Epstein's, escapades. Well, they did yesterday, and they had a bunch of dumbass conspiracy theorists and podcasters come to the White House where they were handed a binder with these files in it directly from whomever gave them to them. But it was just a general gaggle of dumb fucks up there. There was a Cernovich and a Posobiec and that Libs of TikTok loser and DC Drano and just really the cream of the crop of dog shit up there. And I guess the White House decided that those were the upstanding journalists they wanted to have first access to this information. And they were all very proud that they were there, and they all posted on social media about it. They all showed pictures of them holding their binders, and everyone was just so excited until I guess they started looking at it, because there was nothing in it that wasn't already public knowledge. And the sillier thing about it was they had redacted a lot of information that was in the binders that was already available publicly, unredacted. It's been out on the internet. It was released publicly a long time ago, probably at least a couple of years ago. And it was released in an unredacted form. You can just get on the internet and go see these things that were in these binders in its unredacted form for free without having to run a bullshit pro-Russia, I'm a conspiracy theorist blog, or traveling to the White House. It's easy. You just get on the internet and you can go read them. But these dumbasses walked around with these binders like they were so proud. They were special kids. And they were just going to show the world some new stuff. And it wasn't anything that wasn't already out there. So now they're all pissed. And Rep. Luna is pissed. And now Attorney General Bondi has to act like she's pissed too. And she sent a nasty letter to Kash Patel at the FBI about, hey, your FBI didn't turn over all this stuff. They're all starting to fight each other and accuse each other of now being nefarious. So sooner or later, all of these different Trump dumbasses are going to start fighting each other and accusing each other of being a part of the deep state. And that's going to be fun to watch because none of them deserve to be where they are. They're all just dumbasses, and they did not find good people. I would not have a problem if they got actual people who knew how to do these jobs and put them there, or somebody who had some experience at least in some of these jobs or something similar, or had ever been in charge of anything and put them in those positions. But that's not what's happening here. They made Dan Bongino the deputy director of the FBI, for fuck's sakes. What's his claim to fame? That he's a podcaster? That he had a radio program? So they could have just put Sean Hannity in there. He had a radio program that was way more popular than Bongino's. So if we're going to go on that, maybe Sean Hannity should have been vice president. Who knows? Judging him, by popularity. But Bongino was he was a cop for a couple of years or something. He was in the Secret Service for like 3 years. That's his claim to fame. And he just happened to be a popular radio host for somehow. I couldn't stand the guy myself. Big surprise, right? But yeah, no, they're not serious about any of this stuff. Patel isn't qualified to be running the thing. Bondi isn't qualified for anything. For God's sakes, they made Marco Rubio the Secretary of State, which may have been okay if he had been Secretary of State under anybody other than Trump. But he's a cowardly little man, and so he's never going to stand up to his boss and say, no, I think we should do it this way, or this is how I want it to be done, or hey, here's a suggestion. How about we don't fuck with all the people who we're allied with around the world, and how about we don't take the side of our traditional enemy? That might be a good first step for Secretary of State, but he's not going to do it because he's a cowardly little, leg humper, and he's going to do whatever Donald wants him to do, and he's never going to have the guts to stand on his own. So, I don't know, not impressed. And no, this podcast is not just a big anti-Trump thing. If he does something good, I'm going to say he did something good. This is the thing, those of you who don't know me, I don't really play favorites when it comes to calling someone a dumbass or telling them they did a good thing. Just like Pam Bondi earlier in the show, right? She did a good thing, but in general, she's a dumbass. But I did the same thing with all the other presidents. I did the same thing when Trump was running for president, when everybody was saying Russia, 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 Russiagate, Russian collusion. I was the guy who had proven that Russia was influencing right-wing media at the time in order to help Donald Trump get elected. And I was the one saying, no, this isn't a case of collusion with our adversary. Trump wasn't colluding with anyone. Trump was just the recipient of their efforts because they weren't paying him off or anything. They weren't offering him anything in exchange for their support. They were just dumping propaganda into the ecosystem of right-wing media. And right-wing media just did the rest. And that would include people like Cernovich and Posobiec and all these other people who got duped into thinking they were going to get some Jeffrey Epstein information yesterday. Duh, dumbass. So, yeah, they got rickrolled, which is a funny thing because that's what one of the House committees rickrolled everybody with the Epstein file, where you click on it and you get Rick Astley instead, which is kind of fun. It was cute. It was funny. I thought it was funny. A lot of people didn't think it was funny, but I'll say it. It was funny. But they politicized the whole thing, and people were expecting something real, and it didn't happen. So now we're left to wonder, what else is this disclosure task force going to try to dupe us with and tell us we're going to release some new information and not do it, because that's exactly what's already happened. And infighting aside, they might fight it out publicly and say, you told us you were going to do this, or you told us you weren't going to do that. But in the end, it comes down to, what information are you actually going to provide anyone? And so far, none. Absolutely nothing. The first hearings this month, well, tomorrow it'll be this month, in March, are going to be on JFK, if I recall. And we haven't heard anything new about JFK. They're just arguing about the Epstein file that didn't exist, and they just released existing paperwork. There's a lot more out there, and it's really weird how they act like they don't know where it is. He was put on trial in 2 different places. All that information is there, unless it got purged in some way. Who knows? Maybe by the same person who snuck into his prison cell and strangled him. A little Hillary Clinton in a ninja costume in there, choking him out. I think that's what a lot of the right-wing conspiracy theorists wanted us to believe, the QAnon people and such, because who could get to him in prison? People don't get murdered in prison. Have you never watched a movie or a documentary or something? There's a Michael J. White movie out there about the whole thing. People trying to kill people in prison all the time. At least Hollywood wants us to believe that. But I don't think they're going to really release anything new about that either. I don't think we're going to learn anything. And it's really frustrating, because these are things like the UAP stuff and the JFK stuff. These are things that have been questions my entire life. I was born in the late 60s, so it wasn't long after the JFK assassination, and it was still fresh in everybody's minds when I was born. And so I grew up in an era of this whole conspiracy, this grand conspiracy, and everyone except the government thought it was a grand conspiracy. Now, if you look at the science and you look at the investigation and all the documentation, and you really closely watch the Zapruder film and all these other things, yeah, it was one shooter. Could Oswald have done it? Yes, it's proven that he could have done it. You don't even have to be that good. He wasn't that far away, and he had a lot more time than people think he had, because of the whole, they had this myth about 6 seconds. It all happened within 6 seconds, and it didn't. So there are a lot of issues with that. But in general, do I believe the official story in air quotes? Yeah, pretty much. I'm sure there's a lot they're leaving out, but that's going to be about personalities that surrounded this whole thing, I think. And it might be leaving out some things about foreign influence on Oswald, even though it has been talked about a lot. I don't think anything was ever resolved with that about, and pretty much it was all Cuba and Russia were all going to be standoffish and had nothing to do with it. And I don't know if any of that's true. I think if there's going to be any huge revelations about JFK, it might involve the fact that we did have evidence or information that there was foreign involvement, and they just decided not to mention it because they didn't want to start another war. And I would think, personally, I would probably think Cuba as opposed to the Soviet Union, because Oswald already had some connections to Cuba, and we already had a very bad relationship with Cuba. We were already trying to assassinate Fidel Castro. So it wouldn't surprise me if they were the ones who primed and assisted, if someone did, if they were involved somehow with Oswald. And if the government knew it at the time, especially after we already had, the Cuban Missile Crisis and all that stuff, probably did not want to heat up anything any worse, so they would have just said, you know what, we're going to keep this quiet for like the next 70 years so that, we don't ruffle any feathers and start another war. But probably not even that is going to come out. It would be nice if we learned something new about it. Literal libraries of books have been written about the JFK assassination and the various theories and conspiracy theories associated with it. A lot of the conspiracy theories associated with the JFK assassination came straight out of the Kremlin. The KGB created these conspiracy theories in order to try and screw things up here in the United States and just kind of inflame feelings of distrust for our government and stuff like that. That's something that Russia and the former Soviet Union was very good at. And I don't think we ever caught up to them in that kind of approach and the technology involved there. But as far as spreading propaganda and inciting distrust around the world, Russia is very good at that. And they've had 100 years of practice doing it. So a lot of that conspiracy stuff that you read about in books and you watch in documentaries and on episodes of mystery TV shows, a lot of that stuff is just Russian propaganda that was pushed out. And we know this for a fact. So it's not just me saying it, and it's not just me saying I hate Russia. And because, I'll be honest, I am probably biased. I was a child of the Cold War, and I was a West German soldier, and I wasn't West German. I was in West Germany. I was there at the time that the wall fell and stuff, and so being against the Soviets and being against Russia and all those things, it's part of our DNA for my generation. So there's already a tremendous amount of distrust in there, but that's not why. I think a lot of the things because it's things that they actually did. And if you do a little reading on your own, you'll figure it out. Of propaganda from the Soviet Union and from Russia over the years has literally killed millions of people. And if you do a little bit of research, you can find out all about it. So anyway, that's the shit show that's going on in the world today. And I just wanted to get on here and get it off my chest. And a lot of people are going to disagree with me about all of it, and that's fine. It's America. You can have your own opinions. But I just really felt like saying it. And today, I'm not too proud of my country today. That's a very difficult thing for someone like me to say. But I think lately we've been embarrassing ourselves on the world stage. And it's a kind of a good kick in the groin, And I think a lot of countries around the world are going to figure out ways to do without us, which is kind of sad. The American influence around the world has really done a lot of good. A lot of people will argue with that colonial type thing, and we're an imperial nation and all this other stuff. But we've been there for a lot of people who needed us around the world, even people who don't like us. We've still gone and helped them. But if we retract, if we pull back from our influence around the world and get more of this isolationist type approach, and we're just not going to be involved in those other things, that's generally when a lot of bad stuff starts happening. And then we eventually have to become involved. And that's generally not good, because something is going to be terrible in order to sway us into getting involved. That's kind of the way things were in World War I and World War II, where we really didn't want to get involved in somebody else's problems, but eventually we had to get involved. And world wars, that's what happened. So hopefully we don't isolate ourselves to the point where we're back there again, where we aren't involved in what's happening in the world and don't have any influence around the world. But if people stop, and this is like a really shitty thing to say, if people stop fearing us, the world's in trouble. Because that's what has kept peace in a lot of places around the world, was not because people were nice and peaceful. It's because they feared our intervention. And if we remove that from the free world, a lot of bad things can happen. And I'm not saying they will happen. I'm saying the possibility of it happening becomes greater. Because, back in the old, all right, let's talk Cold War. Back in the old Cold War, everybody was afraid that the Russians were going to just roll over the border and come through what was that, the gap, the Darien Gap? Oh, man. It's been so long ago. But the truth was the Russians didn't have the capability of doing that. They didn't have enough gas for their tanks to roll their fleets of tanks across the border and actually attack anybody. They could have maybe done it on a small scale, like one section, but they weren't going to invade Western Europe and decimate it or anything like that, short of the use of nuclear weapons. So, do I think Russia has the capability of taking over Western Europe? No, they don't. They don't have enough people. They don't have enough equipment. They've already been really, really depleted because of their war in Ukraine, which is part of the plan. So could they currently? No. Could they take something small, like maybe in Estonia or Lithuania or someplace? Yes, they could. Could they take and keep Ukraine? Maybe part of Ukraine. But if we pull our influence away and we take our protection away from some of those places, I would not be surprised if Russia was able to absorb some of them or reabsorb them back into the fold. These nations that they lost at the end of the Cold War when the Soviet Union fell apart. But, they attacked Georgia back then. They've done a lot of bad things in the last 25 years. And pretty much everyone has always just acquiesced and let Russia get away with it. And this was the red line. You don't get to take Ukraine. But we did nothing when they took Crimea. We did nothing when they invaded. Nobody came to their aid other than giving money and equipment. So they're not a NATO member, so we're not obligated. And there's all these other things. And if NATO got involved, then, oh my God, there was going to be a world war and all these other things. I don't know. But I think if we remove our protection from certain places in the world, people will be conquered and occupied and captured and just, hey, guess what? You're part of Russia now. I believe that. And that's really the big fear about the whole thing. Is not, do we need to be involved in everybody else's business? No, not really. But do we need to isolate ourselves so that we're no longer an ally to people who have relied on us as allies for a long time? We've been friends with Ukraine for a long time, and back into the 90s. So we've worked with them. We've trained with their military. We've done different things. We use it as like a training ground for certain things back, previously before they were at war. So they've been our friend for a long time. And we've, I'm sure benefited in some way from that. But to tell your long-term friend and ally, we're not going to help you anymore unless you pay us, that's pretty sickening. And it's definitely a kick in the pants for anyone around the world who thinks of the United States as, that shining city on the hill thing, or bring us your poor and you're hungry. And it's kind of all becoming a joke now, but I don't know if it's going to stay that way. Hopefully not. So, hey, it's enough from me for today. Not a good day. Not a good day at all, but tomorrow might be better, but I doubt it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Really? Just Stop with your host, Ross. Make sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss a dose of some common sense.